Right, so we're diving deep into a source today that's making some really strong claims.
Yeah, definitely. It's focused on that high-profile situation, the legal dispute between DDG and Hailey, specifically about their child, Halo.
Exactly. And the source itself, it's a transcript from a YouTube video, right?
Yeah.
Proof, men are done allowing women to lie on them. From Average Man Unplugged.
That's the one. And it presents a very, very specific viewpoint on what it claims came out in court documents and evidence.
Uh-huh. And it uses that claimed information to talk about much bigger ideas like, relationships, accountability, how things look in public.
Precisely. So our mission here really is to walk you through the key arguments within this specific source.
Yeah, to understand their perspective based on the information they claim was revealed. Not necessarily endorsing it, just understanding their argument.
Exactly. It's about dissecting what this one source is putting forward.
And what's interesting right off the bat is how this source frames these alleged court details. They say it totally changes the picture from maybe what people first thought.
Right. They claim DDG had receipts, as they put it, evidence that supposedly showed a completely different side of things.
Okay, so let's get into that. What kind of alleged actions does the source claim this evidence revealed about Hailey? This is where it gets really intense, I gather.
It does. The source transcript lists several really serious allegations it says were backed by evidence. It starts with alleged physical altercations.
Okay, like what specifically?
Well, the source claims there was evidence showing Hailey trying to punch DDG.
Wow. Okay, and it didn't stop there, according to the source.
No. It gets, more disturbing. The source also claims the evidence pointed to her allegedly, intentionally slamming herself into a steering wheel.
Slamming herself into it.
Yeah, and then accusing him of hitting her. That's the claim in the source.
Okay,
Yeah.
What a claim. And wasn't there something even more severe mentioned?
Yes. Again, presented by the source as part of the evidence, there's an allegation that she stabbed him, resulting in a finger cut that apparently needed stitches.
Stitches. Okay, so very serious physical allegations presented by this source.
Correct. And beyond the physical stuff, the source also argues the evidence covered alleged stalking and harassment.
Right, I remember seeing that. Things like air tags.
Exactly. The source claims she allegedly put air tags in his belongings.
And they focused on one incident.
Yeah, they really hone in on one instance, claiming she used an air tag to track him to a movie theater.
And then what allegedly happened?
According to the source, she allegedly threatened the person he was actually with at the theater.
Threatening someone else he was with.
Mm-hmm. And the transcript also includes a claim that she called DDG's mother.
His mother, why?
To threaten him, allegedly. The source quotes something like, "I'm going to fuck your son up."
Directly to his mother. That's quite the allegation from the source.
It is. Then the source moves into alleged manipulation and threats, particularly around attempts to end the relationship.
Okay, how so?
It claims text messages and behaviors showed that, basically every time DDG allegedly tried to break up, Hailey would allegedly say, "I'm gonna kill myself," and crucially add that it would be his fault.
Right, which the source definitely frames as a manipulative tactic.
Clearly. And there's an even heavier claim tied to the child, Halo.
What's that?
The source alleges that before Halo was even born, Hailey allegedly said she wanted to abort the baby.
Oh, wow.
And threatened she would do it if they didn't get back together.
Threatening abortion as leverage, according to the source.
Yes. And the source uses really strong language about this, calling the alleged use of the child a pawn for, quote, self-defense or manipulation, describing it as crazy work and egregious.
So based on all this stuff, they're citing the alleged violence, stalking, threats. How does the source actually describe Hailey's behavior overall?
Well, the descriptions are very strong negative. It labels the alleged behavior as violent, unstable, not mentally okay.
And didn't they use the term narcissistic?
Yes, they did. Specifically tying that alleged narcissism to the tactic of trying to control how others saw him by filing suit when, according to the source, he was legally gagged and couldn't respond.
So controlling the narrative.
That's the argument. The source links these alleged actions to, quote, crazy shit. And importantly, they argue this pattern, including the alleged suicidal threats, was happening before the baby was born.
Why is that timing important to the source's argument?
Because they use it to claim it wasn't solely related to potential postpartum issues. They present it as a pre-existing pattern based on their reading of the evidence they discuss.
Got it. So this set of claims, this picture painted by the source, they argue it should have really shifted the public conversation, right?
Absolutely. The source argues that when this all first blew up, Hailey was, widely believed.
And DDG.
He got heavily bashed, as the source puts it, called an abuser, a narcissist. The source blames this on what it calls a half-story getting out first.
But then, the source says, his side came out through these alleged court documents and evidence.
Right. They mention screenshots, photos, witness statements, even a court order that was granted in his favor.
And the source expected the narrative to change then.
They argue it should have, but they claim that, instead, many women continued to defend Hailey, made excuses.
Which the source interprets how?
As a major lack of accountability. They're very critical of that reaction.
Okay, let's flip to how DDG is portrayed in this source. What does it say about his position and actions?
Well, the source claims he initially didn't want to attack her publicly. It says he stated something like, "I'm never going to get on here and bash Hailey."
Implying he wanted to protect her image.
That's the implication. The source also stresses that he was apparently legally prevented from speaking out at first.
So his silence initially wasn't necessarily by choice, according to them.
Correct. And the source presents his eventual filing for an emergency request for full custody of Hailey as a necessary response.
A response to what, specifically, according to the source?
A direct response to Hailey's alleged actions and her state, as revealed in court. The reasons cited in this source for him wanting full custody and very limited contact, like through a monitored app, are all tied back to those claims we discussed. That she's allegedly suicidal, abusive, unstable, not mentally okay.
And the source mentioned something about him wanting to avoid court initially.
Yeah, it brings up an alleged earlier statement from DDG saying it was in Hailey's best interest not to go to court. The source uses this to suggest he tried to avoid the public mess, the embarrassment, but felt forced into it by her alleged behavior.
Right. This brings us nicely to the broader critiques in the source material. It's not just about this one case, is it?
Not at all. A big chunk of the source is dedicated to criticizing the public reaction, and it particularly targets reactions it attributes to women defending Hailey.
What's the core criticism there?
A major theme, repeated often, is the source's view that many women are, quote, allergic to accountability. It uses terms like delusional and claims there's morally biased support, even when faced with what the source insists is clear evidence of bad behavior.
And we touched on this earlier, but they really push back against postpartum depression as an explanation here.
They do, very explicitly. They point to alleged texts and actions from 2022, before the baby, as their proof that the alleged threats and manipulation weren't just a postpartum thing. They frame it as separate.
And to support these broader points, the source brings in other cases.
Yes, quite a few. They draw parallels to Megan Thee Stallion, and Tory Lanez using that, in their view, to argue women can weaponize victimhood.
Okay, who else?
Johnny Depp and Amber Heard are mentioned, highlighting from the source's perspective a man being falsely accused, losing his career, and then being vindicated later. Jonathan Majors, Xavier Worthy, they're all brought up too.
And the purpose of these comparisons for the source?
It seems to be to bolster their argument that false allegations do happen and that the public shouldn't automatically just believe the woman and condemn the man.
So it's a direct challenge to the sort of believe all women idea.
Explicitly. The source argues history shows women are, quote, capable of lying, just as capable of being bad or evil as men, just maybe differently. It insists its goal isn't division, but showing men what to look out for.
Interesting framing. And they contrast this with how men reacted in a different case.
Yeah, they make a specific point claiming that men generally didn't rush to defend someone like P. Diddy when the evidence of his alleged abuse against Cassie came out.
Implying,
in the source's view, a difference in how men and women approach accountability when public figures face accusations. Men hold men accountable, they suggest, while women defend women regardless. That's their take.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground based on this one source. What does all this mean for you, the listener?
Well, fundamentally, this YouTube transcript uses the DDG and Hailey case as a specific lens to make much broader arguments.
Arguments about how info spreads online, how messy public relationship breakdowns can be.
Exactly. And particularly arguments about accountability and gender dynamics in these situations. So understanding the specific claims and arguments from this source gives you insight into one very vocal viewpoint that's out there.
It really highlights, through their lens anyway, how public stories can be incomplete, right?
Definitely. And it underscores the idea that evaluating claims, even really serious ones, means looking at the information being presented by different sides. In this deep dive, we focused only on the information and arguments from this one specific, clearly one-sided source.
So understanding their case, how they interpret the alleged evidence, and what conclusions they draw, helps you map out one part of this really complex online conversation.
Precisely. It's about understanding that perspective.
So we've really dug into this particular YouTube source today. We've laid out its specific claims about the DDG and Hailey court situation, detailed the alleged evidence it focuses on, and unpacked those broader arguments it makes about accountability, public perception, and gender.
Yeah, and it's clear the source presents a very forceful, very specific viewpoint based on its interpretation of the information it claims was revealed. It's definitely not holding back.
It really isn't. And it leaves us with a pretty significant question, doesn't it? In this age where, personal conflicts just explode into public view, often fueled by bits and pieces of information, strong opinions, competing stories online, how do we, as people trying to make sense of it all, navigate that? How do we form our own informed perspective when things are so charged, especially around really sensitive issues like abuse and who's accountable?
That's the challenge, isn't it? Something to definitely think about.